Yes, please. Lieutenant Colonel, sorry, I didn't mean to demote you. You're
Thank
up.
you, Rabbi. Thank you very much. Good night from Israel, 1 a.m. here. I just came out from bomb shelter. Um, Interesting what's going on. This is the second night that the Israeli Air Force is hunting launchers. And judging by the results, it's doing it successfully. Like many other things that the Israeli Air Force is doing, it does it extremely well. And what's basically going on is that the Israeli Air Force is laying in ambush with different platforms and sensors, waiting for the Iranians to do a certain procedure that prepares launchers for firing. And once those actions are taken, they become visible and vulnerable, the launchers, and then the Israeli Air Force goes in and strikes them. And today, the IDF spokesperson, Brigadier General Defrin, he told everybody that the IDF has already taken out a third of Iran's launchers. So they still have lots of missiles, and Israel hasn't bombed all of the locations of the missiles. But what Israel has done is to strike many of the launchers, and the launchers are actually more important than the missiles. They're the bottleneck. So that's what's going on. And the Iranians now, when they fired a salvo or a round of missiles, this time reportedly it's only 10 missiles. Last time, yesterday, well, they fired during the day today as well, but it was also a relatively small amount. Yesterday, it was around between 30 and 50 per salvo. And on the first and second day of the fighting, the Iranians fired about 100 at any given time. So we're seeing a significant, steady decline in the Iranian ability to fire ballistic missiles at Israel. That's very welcome. That is thanks to the excellence of the Israeli Air Force. Once they fire, of course, we have our air defenses, the Arrow, supplemented by the David Sling, and supported by American THAAD, THAAD, and also anti-missile missiles that are fired from Aegis destroyers or Aegis battleships. And all in all, I think Israel has the best air defenses in the world. I don't think that's even up for discussion. But even they are sometimes vulnerable, and nobody nobody can ensure 100% of hermetic protection. Sadly, 24 Israeli civilians have been murdered by Iranian incoming missiles. Last night, and the night before that was extremely tough. Last night we had direct impacts in Petah Tikva, Bnei Brak, Haifa, and in the south. And sadly, we had several casualties yesterday, 8 of them. And the day before that, an Iranian missile hit an Israeli residential tower. I think it was 8 or 9 stories. It almost completely collapsed, and 10 people were murdered. We're still digging out remains, and there's still one missing person, which is feared dead and caught under the rubble. And the sites of destruction there, I've never seen anything like it. And I've been to Gaza, I've been to Lebanon, and I've seen other battlegrounds with a lot of destruction. This is different. The amount of explosives, the firepower, the sheer explosive capacity of these Iranian missiles, it's massive. Think about it as a flying school bus. That's the size of the object, carrying about 500 kilograms, half a ton of explosives, high weapons grade, high yield explosives, massive damage. So that's what Israel is dealing with. I'd say that on every other front, except for the issue that they've been able to kill Israeli civilians, the Iranians are on the back foot. They are getting hammered on all other fronts. I think Israel has made historic achievements that no other country has ever done against the Islamic Republic of Iran. Israel has never accomplished these things in the past, definitely not so far away, and not against an enemy that is so much more larger and before this war powerful than Israel. But what we have today is an unprecedented situation of aerial supremacy or aerial control or dominance. Israeli aircraft are able to operate in Iranian skies and conduct military missions all over Iran. And as we can see on the map, or you could see on the map behind the rabbi, Iran is a very big country. It's like almost a third of continental US without Alaska. It's a very big country, and it's about 25, 30 times bigger than Israel. Now that you can see that map, we're talking about a very, very big country that is vast, and the distance between Israel's western border and Israel's eastern border and Iran's western border is about 700 miles. But if we're talking about eastern Iran, then we're talking about 2,000, almost 2,000 miles between Israel and Iran. So these are distances. Thank you very much, Rabbi. You're doing a great job. And these are distances that are simply unprecedented, but the Israeli Air Force is showing tremendous skill, logistic, and operational capabilities. We spoke about the degradation of Iranian missile and launching capacity. I think Iranian leadership is in disarray, and I would think be safe to assume that the ability of the Iranian military command to conduct operations, to exercise command and control, has been significantly degraded by the fact that Israel is hunting generals. And Israel took out 20 flag officers, 2 and 3 and 4-star generals in the first strike. And Israel has been taking out additional high-ranking officers, generals of very important positions over the last few days, including the heads of intelligence of the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, and also of the Quds Force. Very important people. That the fact that Israel was able to take them out in a targeted strike, assassination, that should be sending, and I'm pretty sure that it is sending, very cold chills down the spine, chills down the spines of all of the Revolutionary Guard officers and even the simple low-ranking operatives, because that indicates a lot. It indicates that Israel has collaborators and intel on the ground, knows the whereabouts of senior generals who probably took defensive and evasive measures in order to be alive, yet they were killed, and that is no small thing. Now, regarding the nuclear. So Israel is making significant progress against the Iranian nuclear military program. The program is wide, it is dispersed, it is embedded and protected and hidden underground, and it is comprised of many different components. Israel, I think, has very good visibility and understanding of what the Iranian nuclear program is, and Israel is chipping away at the different components with very good progress at various locations, whether it is Natanz, Isfahan, Tabriz, Arak, and a few other locations. There are still locations that Israel hasn't tapped yet. And of course, the big deal and the most important location is Fordo, which is not far from the holy city of Qom, just south of Tehran. You can see it on the map there. It's kind of northern Iran. There's the holy city of Qom, and just about 17 miles north of Qom is the facility of Fordo. Still unclear how Israel will take care of it, if Israel has the ability to take care of it, and how it will do it. Maybe the US will decide to get involved and to deliver the coup de grace with a few 40,000 pound bombs delivered by a strategic bomber, a B-2. Doesn't look like the US is interested in doing so, but that may change. And maybe Israel will have to find other solutions in order to deal with it. I don't think that Israel can declare mission accomplished in terms of degrading Iran's nuclear capabilities with an intact Fordo. So we'll have to see what happens and what solution Israel finds. And I think that so far we've seen lots and lots of tactical and strategic creativity by Israeli forces, Mossad, and Israeli intel and Israeli Air Force. So we'll wait and see what kind of nice solution Israel will come up to, if based on the understanding that the US is not going to deliver weapons there. One thing that some people may have overlooked because of the amount of events and how dynamic the situation is a snapshot of the Iranian empire of evil. Up until October 7, and if you'd heard me before that, but also when I had the great pleasure of coming and visiting and speaking in person, I spoke a lot about the Iranian proxies, about how Iran was in the driving seat, how Iran was dictating events and defining strategy, and how they were operating according to a very clear and simple strategy that they built, and they were executing it, and we were responding to their strategy. Now are the first days where I can say Israel is in the driving seat, and Israel is finally dictating events and catching the Iranians by surprise. There are two things that definitely were not on my bingo card when I was thinking about the future that really surprised me over the last few days. Many things, I was happy and excited with. Mossad, Israeli Air Force, Special Forces, all kinds of achievements on the ground. That's great, and we've spoken about it, and I'm sure you've also been excited to see and read and view it. But when you think about the state of the Iranian Union, to use an Americanism, their proxies that they spent so much money, so much effort, so much energy in building, Hezbollah, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, the Houthis, and of course Iranian proxies in Iraq and what they used to have in Syria. Today, when the Iranians scan the horizon, they don't see much. The Houthis are still there and they still have missiles and they are firing at Israel, but I would put it more in the category of nuisance than real strategic threat to Israel currently. And the most astonishing thing was when Tehran picked up the phone to Hezbollah in Lebanon and said, "Listen, we're under attack by the Zionists. We need your help." The response that they got was, "Well, we'd like to, but we're busy." And that is revolutionary. The fact that Hezbollah is not coming to the assistance of their masters or their former masters, unheard of and unthinkable 2 years ago. Iran would have said jump, Hezbollah would have said how high. That was the relationship. And another quite astonishing factor is that Israel is operating, and with the kind assistance here of the rabbi, you can see the map. Israel is flying over Syrian airspace and conducting operations also over Iraqi airspace on the way to Iran. Now, Syrian airspace is not friendly. Syria is not friendly. But for the first time, the Syrian regime is saying that we're actually okay with Israel using our airspace. And I can tell you that a lot of the refueling is happening above Syrian airspace. And it's amazing in two ways. One way is that Israel is able to do so, and that Israel created the conditions in the air to be able to do so. How did that happen? When Israel took the strategic decision to take out serious strategic weapons, air defenses, etc., after the regime was overthrown, that enabled Israel with that freedom of movement above Syria. But it's one thing for it to be happening. I think it's even more amazing that the Syrians are acknowledging it and saying it for other Arabs to hear and for the Iranians to hear. And that's a clear direction, clear indication by the Syrians where they are leaning and who they're betting on. Of course, this is thanks to American diplomacy and the fact that the US is providing Syria, the new Syrian regime, with some kind of options for the future and something to look forward to if they do the right thing and if they're smart. And still, the Syrian regime is smart and they're doing the right thing, and that is quite amazing. I think that the Iranians today feel quite alone, according to the fact that now we see reports in American media that the Iranians are reaching out through their Gulf friends to the US and trying to impress upon Israel that, you know, they're ready to talk, and that if Israel stops firing, then they'll be ready to make concessions. That's a bit late in the game. You know, they had their opportunity. There have been about 20 years of diplomacy and negotiations with which the Iranians used very skillfully in order to build their nuclear weapons and to advance their program. And there's been 60 days under President Trump where they had the ability to do so, but chose to continue with their old and pretty effective tactics of to obfuscate, delay, confuse, and basically buy time and protect themselves using these negotiations. And so I don't think Israel is going to stop. I don't think America is going to force Israel. On the contrary, I think President Trump likes what he's seeing. He likes the fact that Israel is, and I won't use bad language, but really giving it to the Iranians, really in every sense, in every parameter. And the fact that the Iranians are left with very little, very few tools to fight back against Israel. I think it would be a grave, grave mistake if the Iranians decide to attack American targets. If they do, I hope, of course, that no harm is done to American servicemen. But if they do, I'd be quite happy, because that would mean probably the end of that regime in a fast and quite violent way. And there's an old truism in military affairs that when your enemy is making mistakes, don't interfere. So maybe the Iranians will make additional mistakes. I think they've been making quite severe mistakes the last 3 days. The fact that they're firing missiles at our civilians is a huge strategic mistake. They should have kept it clean, and they should have focused only on air bases and targets that are clearly military. The fact that they fired recklessly into our cities and murdered Israeli civilians gives Israel all the legitimacy it needs in order to pound additional targets in Iran. So far, in terms of targeting, Israel is not targeting beyond military, nuclear, and some certain logistic parts of the military. Israel has not tapped into the target box that is national infrastructure. It has not started to attack political targets, seat of government, supreme leader, and many other things that could be symbolic and really weakening. Yes, today Israel took an interesting step and attacked the Iranian broadcasting company, which is a very important tool of oppression in Iran. And if you want to see a funny video, check out the live broadcast from Iran today when Israel struck that building. And if there are Persian speakers in this Ashkenazi synagogue, which I doubt, then you could maybe listen to the responses and see responses on social media of Iranians, how absolutely happy, elated they are to see this notorious tool of oppression, the Iranian TV services, the national broadcaster, to see them burn and suffer. Not them people, but them, the organization. Why? Because this is a very important tool of oppression. If you want to learn more about that institution, there's a great monograph that FDD published many years ago. It's called Torture TV, and how that the national broadcaster really was a tool of oppression, is a tool of oppression, and how what an important role they have in the whole oppressive system that the regime deploys against Iranian civilians. So nothing really to do with Israel, but just the good old oppression of Iranian civilians by the Islamic regime. So it's on FDD's website, and I just retweeted it for those of you who have X and follow me on the account. Just an interesting read. By the way, that was the first document that I saw written by experts at FDD many years ago. I picked it up at their offices, leafed through it, and I said, wow, this is a very good document. This is compelling. This is excellent research. These people know what they're doing. This is interesting. I never knew about the Iranian Broadcast Network. And that's when I told myself that this is an organization that I like and I'm going to work with them. And today I'm a senior fellow. So that's a nice little deviation from it. Before we go into questions, I'd say that there's, of course, a lot of work that remains to be done. I think Israel has at least a few more days, maybe a week or so, of military operations and strikes in order to achieve what it needs to achieve, the minimum achievement in Iran. And if I'm very honest and forthcoming, I think that the goal isn't just to deny Iran of any ability to develop a nuclear bomb or to have ballistic missiles or to continue funding terrorists in the region. It's all of those, definitely. But I think Israel is also hoping for a chain of emotions to start that will end with the falling of the regime, with the toppling of the regime by the Iranian people that will be induced by external pressure applied by Israel. I think that the Iranian regime is very much aware of this and they are cautious of it. And I think that they can feel the burn. They can feel the threat, and they understand that that could be near. We know from history that Iran has it's an old ancient nation and country, 2,500 years of history. They've had many violent exchanges of power, and most of them have been with an external influence, application of pressure and violence, and then internal uprising against a regime that had become corrupt and wasn't providing services and doing its job towards the population, which looks very familiar. That is what the Islamic regime is: corrupt and not delivering food, not delivering security, not delivering electricity, not delivering education, and constantly getting in trouble with the world and getting sanctions because they are prioritizing Gaza and Palestine and Lebanon and Yemen and Iraq and Syria and many other places instead of the Iranian people. So where this leaves us, and with this we'll go over to questions, I think we're in a very interesting position. I think through tactical military brilliance, Israeli decision makers are now being handed not quite yet the silver plate, but it's very nice what Israeli decision makers are getting from the military. And what I hope is that we'll continue to have regional and global legitimacy to continue to pursue our aims, and that we will be wise in our strategic decisions to keep our eye on the ball in terms of what it is that we're trying to achieve. And of course, to always remember that military action is what precedes diplomatic agreements and political agreements, and that to have long-term effective achievements, then you have to turn military action into that. And that's, of course, the responsibility of statesmen, of diplomats, and the elected people. And I hope that will happen. But it is it is quite moving times. For the first time in my life, we are holding the Iranian regime to task. We're making them pay for their aggression, for building terrorist organizations, for attacking us, for vilifying us, for causing us to waste resources and energy on defending ourselves against all of the terrorist organizations that they founded. And those chickens are now coming home to roost. and the Iranians are feeling the consequences of 2.5 decades of aggression against Israel. Can't hear you, Rabbi.
I'm muted. Sometimes I feel like in real life I'm muted.
I'm
The
sure you're a married man like most of us.
well, this is being recorded, so I don't know how to respond to that.
Diplomatically, of course.
Yes, thank you.
You love your wife. You
Yes.
precious. She's precious, and she's always right, just like mine.
100% true.
Yep.
Yes. And no, as long as we've established that fact, we can continue. Thank you for taking the time. This is an unbelievable opportunity for us as a larger synagogue community. This is there. I've noticed that in Zoom, there's an inverse to in person. When you do in person, people slowly arrive late and late and late. But when you do a Zoom, they start to leave early and early and early, and your numbers are only going up. So way to go. Full credit. I have 100,000 questions I want to ask, but I actually want to go back to Israel. If I can, there we go. I want to first ask specifically how this, or if it has any effect on any sort of negotiations or attempt to free the hostages, and then maybe use that as an opportunity to share. We're obviously still in a war in Gaza. There seems to me to be pretty serious unrest in the West Bank. How does this, or does it affect the reality on the ground there as well? Hostages, Gaza, West Bank, go.
Yeah. So all this excitement about um, handing it to the Iranians, sadly, with the topic of hostages and Gaza, I'm not quite as optimistic. And I think that the only positive that can come out of the situation with Iran is a significant weakening, humiliation, defeat of the Iranians. Maybe that will have some kind of a halo effect, spillover on Hamas. And maybe it will be, the last straw that impresses upon Hamas that their strategy of continuing to hold on to the hostages, refusing to surrender, and dragging out the war totally unnecessarily, that it's futile and they can save what's left, maybe get a ticket out of town, and if they return the hostages, and spare Gaza from what Israel will do eventually if they don't. I don't know what the chances are for that happening, but I know that I says that if Israel really defeats the Iranians, then maybe that would happen. Other than that, we're still in the same square when it comes to the hostages. Um, Significant efforts are being invested every day by the defense establishment, Shabak, IDF, Intel, even Mossad, in focusing on finding clues and eventually getting hostages back. And we're able to repatriate, we security forces were able to repatriate bodies of hostages that were murdered. A few have been returned in the last week and a half. That's a certain amount of solace for the families, but we still have 54 hostages left, 20 we presume alive, and we seriously fear the well being of 2 out of those 20. And of course, all of them are suffering, they're enduring hell underground at the hands of Hamas captors. So, sadly, I'm not very optimistic about the situation there. And that's a front that we will still have to deal with. Once we'll avail ourselves after dealing with Iran, we will still have Gaza to deal with. Now, Judea and Samaria, um, situation is relatively stable. They're on lockdown in general, and as a preventive measure, Israel ordered Palestinians. They can, of course, move about in areas in area A, but they cannot travel to area B and C, where Israelis live, out of precaution related to the activities in Iran. Uh, Currently, no significant major attacks. There's lots of reports, intel reports, that there's willingness to and interest in doing it, but bottom line, no significant events, and Israel continues with counterterrorism operations in that area. That problem will persist, even if we will do the most amazing, creative, spectacular things against the Islamic Republic of Iran. The morning after, the Palestinians will still be there, and we will still have to deal with them and find creative solutions to defeat those who need to be defeated, and perhaps reconcile or do creative things with those that we can.
Thank you.
I'm just going to turn on the AC. I'm listening to your question. I'm just turning on the AC.
Yeah, whatever you'd like. I'm impressed you have a suit on. Are you sure you're Israeli? The going back to Iran as the Ayatollah gets more and more boxed in, I'm wondering if there is concern in two directions. One, is there capabilities we haven't seen yet that we keep, if they're 6 days away or whatever from a bomb, are they at Fordo making a nuclear weapon right now that they're going to attach to a rocket? One, and then two, we've talked about maybe America joining on the side of Israel, but is there concern about, Russia, China, North Korea, Qatar, or someone joining on the side of Iran?
So we don't know what they're doing in Fordo. That is also one of the reasons why it's so significant that Fordo is dismantled and taken out of commission. That's an X factor. We also don't know for certain, as far as I understand, where all of Iran's fissile material is, where all the enriched material is. It's also a question that is probably very high ranking in the list of issues that Israeli intelligence is looking into. Where do they have it? Do they control it? Are they trying to move it? Will they try to move it to some other country, some other facility? Interesting and sensitive to follow, but I have no updates. It's more questions than answers about it. But I think the assumption should be that they are taking drastic measures. They're at war, they're attacked, and I think that they will be doing whatever they can in order to save themselves. So I think that's the working assumption, and I think Israel is following that extremely closely. In short, regarding China and Russia, I don't think so. I think that Russia has much bigger fish to fry, and they do not have spare assets to chuck around and to help the Iranians. I do not think that China is interested in confronting the US. And my answer could have been different if Israel hadn't been so overwhelmingly successful in the first and second day of the operations. The fact that Israel was so successful took out the senior military command. After a few days, achieved aerial dominance and is just operating at will in Iran. That's not a good horse to be betting on. And if I'm Russian, you don't throw. They don't have good money, but you don't throw Russian money after a bad bet. A bad horse. It's not done. It would be a waste. And it's not as if the Russians have an abundance of assets and capabilities to throw around. So while the chance exists, and while the Russians under Putin, of course, have shown a tremendous ability to surprise people, analysts, and so-called Russia experts, I'm no Russia expert. I'm just, applying military logic. Anything can happen, but I don't think it's very likely. And I think that the Iranians are a bit on their own. Left with no good allies, and their proxies are not very effective. So it's a very cold and hard awakening for the Iranians.
So keeping on that line of the international world, specifically the rest of the Arab world, particularly the Abraham Accord and the Abraham Accord hopeful countries, Jordan, Egypt as well, and Saudi Arabia, what are we hearing both publicly and privately from those countries?
So I don't know if I told this last time I was in the synagogue, but there's something that I call the Israel mistress syndrome, where there's many countries, and again, we are married men and we love our families and our wives. That's well, I'm not, of course, insinuating anything else, but there's this thing where, some men, they have a mistress, happy to enjoy time together, but you don't take her home to meet the family and you don't bring her for Shabbat dinner. That's how many countries in the region have been treating Israel. Happy to interact, happy to enjoy the uh, intel, counterterrorism, high tech, agriculture, medical devices, etc., etc. But we're not so happy to support Israel politically in international fora. We're not so happy to be seen together, but we're happy to be doing business on the down low. So that exists still. And I think many countries are still, unfortunately, kind of bound by it, mostly because of the situation in Gaza and the Palestinians. But I would say that what I hear still below the table or below the reporting threshold is unsurprisingly awe at Israel's prowess and success against the Iranians. The Iranians were believed, the Islamic Republic of Iran was believed to be extremely potent and dangerous. And who could ever think of attacking Iran? Not Saudi Arabia with its unlimited resources and tremendous military, and not Egypt, and all of the other countries that the Sunni Muslim countries, they were deterred and intimidated by Iran. And now little Israel, with our 10 million people, goes ahead and really takes Iran, or yeah, teaching them a lesson, I would say, in humility and military capabilities so far. So what I think is happening is that the countries, I think, are monitoring very closely what's happening. And I think this will be a great leap forward for Israel in the region. It will greatly strengthen Israel's stock and how people in the region look at Israel. And I think it will bring good tidings for the future. If Israel, again, is disciplined, focused, keeps his eye on the ball, and focuses on what it wants to achieve, and does it in a clever way, then I think in a rather short period of time, President Trump can translate those achievements into an expansion of the Abraham Accords. It could be tremendously beneficial for the US because Israel is the American ally in the region. Israel delivered, and now the US can take advantage of that and forge new alliances and agreements and prosperity in the region. So I'm very hopeful, and of course the underlying enabler here is the military achievement so far against Iran.
Excellent. So I'm going to ask one more question that I got from there's roughly 15 people here in person behind, Saudi Arabia, if you look at the images, right? So I gotten some cards handed to me, and then Rob is supposed to be collecting from the 175-ish people who are online. Remember, if you are watching on Zoom, then go to the Q&A function and put your question in. You won't be able to see other people's questions, though we are getting a lot. Rob will be able to see all of the questions and try and compile and consolidate, so your question gets asked. So Lieutenant Colonel, I think we all need to take blood pressure medication before we open our news apps on our phones because we know what's about to come. I'm told that you have been doing some work with Bottom Line Media and maybe would like to share a word or two about what that work's about and what you're doing there.
Yeah, so I'm working together with my partner, Ariella Novak from New Jersey. And what we've been doing over the last half year or so, well, actually since the war started, but in under that umbrella for about half a year, is trying to help the media do its job and to reflect professionally on what's going on in the Middle East. We're doing it not in a contrarian way. We're not shaming. We're not doing what other organizations do, and they do it very well, like honest reporting and camera and others. That's less what we do. But what we want to do is give journalists and news organizations the tools and access to the knowledge they need in order to report professionally. So it's through education, through bringing them here, through providing them with information and being there for their queries and requests for information. And it is through producing content and information, which is my end of it, about the situation in the Middle East, about Israel, and making that available to people who cover the conflict. Why do we do it? Because we see that it's needed, and we are many times angered and frustrated by sub-professional standards and reporting when it comes to Israel. And we try to influence that and shape it and help Israel get a better shake, not a fair shake, but a better representation in international media.
All right. So FTD and Bottom Line Media, if you're looking for, sorry, there's a dad outside teaching his kid to ride his bike and just went by 3 times. I hope it goes well, but it distracted me for a moment. FTD and Bottom Line Media, we'll keep them in our hearts and minds. I'm going to now
Thank
spotlight
you.
Rob, and I'm going to de-spotlight me, so you'll lose the Middle East for a minute. It's just
All right. Jonathan, nice to see you again. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Rob. Nice to see you too.
So I'm going to try and consolidate some of these questions. So I'll start, and if it's a little wonky, I apologize. But so Allison and Ellen are asking a question about the day after. So the consolidated question is, there are any number of authoritarian regimes that have been overthrown in the Middle East that where it turns into chaos and not necessarily in the direction everybody is hoping for, which is democracy. Do you have an opinion as to what the day after might look like and whether democracy is a possibility?
Those are good questions. Let's first state that Iran does not have a legacy of democracy. It does not have the institutions, and it doesn't have a memory of democracy because it never encountered it. It was under foreign rule for many decades, and then it was a republic under a king, which was an authoritarian type of rule, not very benign and not democratic. And then the Islamists took over and have been ruling and oppressing Iran since 1979. So I'm not naive. I wouldn't say that I think there will be a peaceful transfer of power in Iran and that they would transition from Islamic Sharia law to liberal democracy without bloodshed. No, I don't think that's going to happen. And I think it would be naive to think so and childish. There will be blood, there will be discomfort, there will be sacrifices, because that is how power transitions from dictatorships. I haven't seen, well, maybe Eastern Germany, they crumbled and imploded quite without significant events, but all other despots and tyrants that I remember in history, they didn't go peacefully. They went kicking and screaming, and they had to be dragged out. And I don't think that the Iranian regime has any different patent on transition of power and doing it. So no, it's not going to be tidy, but eventually I think and I hope that the Iranians will maybe in the future be able to reclaim their country and chart a different path than the one that they're on now, which is a path that is riddled with corruption, with poverty, with a dysfunctioning government that doesn't work for the civilians, and it serves out many other goals, but it doesn't do good for people there. and it's tremendous human potential that is lost. Israel doesn't have the power to control what happens and how or if there's a transition of power in Iran. The only thing that Israel can do is apply pressure on the regime externally, and then maybe things will happen and maybe the Iranian people will rise up. However, I'd say that, if we look at history, for a revolution against an oppressive regime to happen, you usually have to have external pressure and a trigger, and also some kind of existing structure of opposition. That doesn't exist in Iran, specifically because the Iranian regime is an oppressive regime and they don't want any type of opposition, which means that any opposition will be disorganized, and a disorganized opposition has limited chances of succeeding, and usually it will need more violence and more activity in order to gain power, and it will be splintered and less effective. So we're not looking at a clean, benign situation. But to tell you the truth, and this may sound harsh, I'm not overly concerned by that. I am much more concerned by the Iranian regime continuing to terrorize Israel, continuing to fund terror organizations, continuing to wreak havoc in the Middle East, and just, to leave a trail of devastation wherever they go. Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, Yemen, it's only trouble. So for the people who asked the question, I think if we compare the amount of damage that the Iranian regime has done elsewhere to what may happen in Iran, then I think they've done so much more damage elsewhere. Getting rid of that regime is a very, very noble cause.
Great, great. Okay, so we have a question from Amir, and I'll put it together with with something else, which is why is there so much damage to the homeland? He hears that 10 to 15% of the missiles are getting through. Another one that goes along with that is some of the commentators are saying that if the United States does not help Israel, that it's going to necessitate IDF special forces. So those two questions hopefully going together, maybe you could take a shot at.
Yeah, I'm a commentator too on Channel 12, and I would caution against listening to commentators. So, people say a lot of things on TV. As gesucht. But in a more serious way, yes, I think those figures are correct, because that's what the IDF has said, between 10 and 15, closer to 15%. That's a high percentage. With Iron Dome dealing with rockets and mortars and missiles and drones, we were talking about almost 92, 93% success rate. And this is not the case with the incoming ballistic missiles that the Iranians are firing. Still, it is a tremendously high percentage. And I think that, the sad thing is, Israelis are warned. We get push notifications like you have Amber Alerts in the US, where the phone goes crazy, even if you have it on silent, and it just starts beeping this very intimidating noise. So first you have the Amber Alert, and then you have the push notification from the Homefront Command app if you've downloaded it. And then there's an alarm that sounds in the air. And all of those indicators are supposed to impress upon Israelis, now is the time to go to your bomb shelter. Some, for reasons that are difficult for me to understand, chose not to. And it's out of 24 Israelis that were murdered by Iran, 2 were inside their bomb shelter in Petah Tikva, which freakishly was hit directly with an incoming missile, and the bomb shelter it didn't stand a chance against that amount of explosives. But other than that, all of the other Israeli casualties, the people who were killed, were people who were outside, not in the where they're supposed to be. So there's a lot to speak about discipline, listening to orders or directives and following them out of an interest of self-preservation. I think that what Israel is doing now is, as I said, choking their ability, the Iranian ability to fire. I don't know if the Iranians will be able to fire tomorrow. Now they got off 10. That's a almost irrelevant. It's a very small number. Israel continues to hunt them. So maybe they'll be able to continue to fire and maybe they'll be able to challenge the system, but maybe not. But in any case, there's a lot of things that people should be doing in order to stay safe. Regarding the second question, maybe there's more than one way to skin a cat, even a cat that is hidden, what is it, 60, so 180 feet below ground and many layers of stone and rock and concrete and else. Yes, it's a difficult target, but I think that so far Israel has shown quite remarkable military creativity. And yes, we do not have strategic bombers. We do not have the B-52, but we have other tools available. And since this is a primary objective, I think Israel will take the necessary steps in order to get it done. I think it would be unwise to go into the details of it, of what I could imagine, but I think that Israel has a few tools that would make it possible. None of them as simple as having a nice blonde American pilot dropping the bombs on Fordo. That would be kind of that would be cool. But if that isn't available and understandable from an American perspective, totally get it, that isn't available, then Israel will do different things. It isn't
Right.
impossible.
Okay, so the brief follow-up on that, just because a bunch of people are asking about this, is why doesn't Israel have a bunker buster? What is so difficult about it, I think, is probably the question about developing such a weapon.
Well, excuse me for my ignorance. I suppose it's New Testament, but you'll correct me, Rabbi, or maybe Rob, you'll correct me. Ask and you shall receive. Is that ours or New Testament?
I think that is a phenomenal way to end this, Rabbi, don't you?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, we have asked, we have not received. And I think that's for specifically the reasons that we find ourselves in now, because it's very clear why we would be asking, and it's also very clear why we were not receiving, because that is really the bottleneck. That is the ultimate thing that we need to have in order to get the job done. So we will, I have confidence. And I think that maybe we'll have another conversation down the road, who knows, where I'll be able to say more about what Israel did in Fordo. For operational security reasons, I think it would be unwise to go into more details. I'll just say that it is not impossible. It could mean more risk for troops, for soldiers, for airmen, but it is not impossible. And I don't think that Israel is going to back down and leave Fordo intact. I don't see that as a scenario.
Thank you so much for your time. I think if we get a third one, we're going to get you an apartment here in Woodbury, so you can just come join us.
I have friends in Hewlett Park, so I'll stay
Okay.
over with them.
In Long Island terms, that's like Iran. Like, I can't let it end without first mentioning several. I got texts from multiple people. We have a number of Persian congregants, you should know, who speak Farsi, and we will all be pestering them on Shabbat and beyond to tell us what is on Iranian state TV and or what's left of Iranian state TV, etc. It is. It's remarkable, and we've heard you take us on this journey to imagine October 6th, where Israel is in fear from Hezbollah, Syria is still a threat, Hamas, the Houthis, and Iran, and all of this was began because Hamas was afraid, or Iran was afraid, that Israel might make peace with Saudi Arabia. So to imagine that the end result could be an obliterated Hamas, a dramatically weakened Hezbollah, Houthis who like to yell a lot but seem to have been put in their corner, and a weakened Iran and peace with Saudi Arabia would be like quite the way to tell the world that October 7th is not your solution. So may it be so, and may it also, of course, bring the hostages home. Thank you for taking the time. Everyone else, I'm sure we had 100 more questions. We'll just have to bring you back. Thank you.
Thank you and shalom. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Rob.
Shalom. Thank you.
Thank you again to the Elke Rosen Foundation and the Rosen family for making this a possibility. We really appreciate it. Everyone else, this was our first webinar, and I have yet to get an angry email, so here's hoping that it went well. Be well. All right.